Good evening, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to the running for the International Executive Board, or Tribunal, for Phi Alpha Delta Law Fraternity International. Today's moderator is Michelle Isherwood, who is a international board member at large. And at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Michelle. Michelle, it's all yours.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I'm going to introduce our panelists who will answer questions, and we're going to go through the agenda. First, we have Jay Ross, current international justice. We have John Miguel, current international vice justice. We have Nicole Gritta, who's our current international marshal. Nicole Winget, who is, like me, an international board member at large. Kim Gallant, who is Chief Tribune. No, who is a member of the Tribune. Sorry. Thanks, Kim. And and Kitty Maloney, past international justice and current chair of the International Advisory Board. Did I get that right? Okay. I'd like to thank them for hopping on to answer some questions. I want to go over the agenda. Everyone can see this. Our agenda today, we're hoping to do about 35 minutes-ish with some presentation, and then open it up for questions and hopefully get your answers out. We are being recorded so that people can watch this at a later time that might be more convenient for them. So first, we're going to talk about the timeline and what to submit. We're going to talk about some myths. We're myth busting. I actually like that show a lot. Expectations and commitments, helpful skill sets, and then we'll get to any questions, comments, anything like that. So what I'd like to get started with Jay Ross talking about the new timeline, and then we'll move into Nicole Gritta talking about what to submit, and if any of the other panelists have some comments in this, that would be great too. So in dates, Jay, do you want to kind of talk about the new timeline and when things need to be submitted and how that's going to work?
Okay, give me a second here while I stop coughing. Essentially, as far as the timeline goes, we have charged the committee more or less, even though the committee didn't have to be charged until March 28th. We put out the charge early. More or less every member that's going to be on the committee has been picked by the DJ in that district. In districts without DJs, I've had to pick a couple of people for the committee, which the board gave me their consent on. Generally, it was people who the executive office provided me. If you're a candidate, or you want to be a candidate for one of these offices, you're looking to get the nomination. The big issue here is April 7th. You need to get your written statement of intent supporting materials. And now we're allowing for policies allowing for 3 pages. In past, it had been 1 page front and back because it was like hard copy. Now that we're virtual, you can submit the 3 pages, and it should be a written statement of intent, what you intend to run for, you think you'd be the best candidate, and then whatever supporting materials that you submit. It could be a resume. It really should highlight whatever it is, it should highlight your leadership experience in Phi Alpha Delta and other organizations. I can't know if it says that much. I mean, that's really all I have to say as far as the timeline. I mean, there are other dates. July 6th, the presentation, the committee presents the report to the International Justice. July 22nd, the committee report gets provided to the membership, and then we have convention commencing actually on August 5th, and the election under the way we're doing it now, should there be this should the convention occur as planned, would be August 8th. Anyway, I don't know if anybody has any questions for me. Not much to it there.
Want to talk a little bit about what the statement of intent is and kind of what other supporting materials maybe people might want to submit?
Oh, you want me to speak on that too?
No, Nicole can talk about that.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Nicole Gritta. Apologize in advance if you hear some background noise. My lawn guys showed up right as it was my turn to speak. But as Michelle said, I'm the current international marshal. As Jay mentioned, it used to be 1 page that you could submit. Now we have increased that to 3 pages. But I would encourage you to not just submit a resume, to not just submit bullet points in terms of your leadership experience in Phi Alpha Delta and other organizations, although that's important. Now that you have a little bit more space, I think it's very important that you speak to what you can bring to the board. We're going to talk later about skills that are required or important for board members, and I think that you should try and highlight some of your skills. What other nonprofits have you worked with? What other boards have you served on? What experience do you have in those other types of service that would be instrumental to moving our fraternity forward? What type of ideas do you have for the fraternity? If you know other people who have run in the past or who are on the board now, talk to them, get some information, ask them to share what they submitted before. Have somebody review it. I had several people review my statement before I submitted it, and I got feedback, some of which I took, others of which I, appreciated, but I had to, at the end of the day, make my statement my own. So I think the most important thing that you can take away from this is this, especially in light of the new process, is a way to highlight yourself, but it shouldn't just read like a bullet point by bullet point by bullet point. Those things are important, but what's more important is highlighting what experience you can actually bring to the organization and how you can move the organization forward.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. So now I want to move to busting the myths. And I thought Kim Gallant and John McKell could give us talk about myths that people have heard and kind of what's true, what's not true, those sorts of things. So I don't know, Kim, do you want to start out and kind of address some of the things that people think might be true to run for the board, but really aren't?
Sure. I thought, was John Karasik going to do this part?
John Karasik can weigh in as well.
Okay.
The 3 of you.
All right, cool. So the first thing, obviously, is, you don't have to be a DJ in order to run for the International Executive Board or for the Tribunal. Being a DJ is a great job, and someone told me many years ago is it's the best job in the fraternity, and I totally agree with that. But you don't have to be a DJ in order to run for the board or for the Trib. Getting into, we'll get into some of the expectations of the skill sets and things that you do need, but that's the biggest one. The other is you don't have to have joined in law school or even in pre-law. Your lineage doesn't have to go all the way back to the pre-law chapter or even to law school. You can run for the board or for the Trib as an alumni who joined us as an alumni. And so those are 2 of the biggest myths, I think, that are out there.
John Karasik, do you want to add to that since you have personal experience?
And kind of related to what Kim was just saying. I mean, I was neither of those things that Kim just mentioned as sort of mythical prerequisites. I was not a law school member. I joined as an alum. I was not a DJ. I had been alumni chapter justice, but I had never served as DJ. So those really, and I'm not alone in that regard. There's one other board member who's currently on the board, never has served as a DJ. A couple of other current board members
had been DJs in the past, but were not serving as DJs at the time that they were elected. So, it's really not, a necessary precursor. And nor is it really a necessary evolution. It's not like you graduate from being a DJ to a trib or from a DJ to a board member, from a trib to a board member. They're different roles, and they have different skill sets, different requirements, different time commitments, different things that you're going to be working on. But it's not like if in the military you get promoted from an 03 to an 04 or something like that. It's a very different role, and it's not a linear progression. It's something else. So the things that you want to think about are what do you want to accomplish as a board member? Why do you want to be in this role? What have you been doing to develop those skills that you need? Those are the sorts of things that you should be thinking about, and not whether you're a DJ now or you've been serving as a DJ for a certain number of years and now it's time to graduate, because that's really not it at all. Over.
Have any other myths that you'd like to address? Okay.
I think, wait, Michelle?
Go ahead.
So I think there is, and it has changed in the last few bienniums, but there used to be the myth of, well, you had to start off as a trib and then you'd make your whole way up. And it's not that. We worked very hard to separate out that the trib was not a stepping stone to the board. It could be, but they were two separate but equal bodies. And even though I did start my international career over on the tribunal, I understood the difference. And when it was ready for me to step off the trib, because I had taken it to where it could go, and there was a very enthusiastic and willing successor, I passed the torch to her and made the decision to run for the board. But it wasn't that I didn't look at it as a stepping stone. So it should be clear that those two bodies are separate. And while people may run for the tribunal and later run for the executive board and vice versa, each one has its own unique skills and requirements.
Thank you. John McKell, can you address expectations and commitments? I know Jay, you may want to weigh in too, but if we could start with John, kind of, what's the time commitment, the expectations for board members, time commitments, any financial commitments, responsibilities. If you could address some of those issues, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely, Michelle. The expectation is that if you choose to run for the board, that you're going to prioritize Phi Alpha Delta. You're committing that P.A.D. is going to be first among equals in what you do for in the community. Yes, health, family, job are priorities. But after that, you're saying by being on the board of directors that this is primarily important to you. So that's the expectation. There are monthly conference calls. There are 2 yearly in-person meetings. There's travel to the district conferences, the spring district leadership transition conferences. All of that is a lot of time. And that's not even discussing the committee work that the IJ will assign you. That's not discussing prepping for all the meetings. The expectation is that you will spend a lot of time. As far as your treasure, there is no pay to play. I was discussing this with somebody else today, and they wanted me to make that really clear. Yes, we're all volunteers. And if you can't afford to make to cover those expenses, the travel expenses, the hotel, then yes, the fraternity can refund you. And we want the best, most talented, most committed people to serve on our board. So just because somebody has more money doesn't mean they are the better candidate. Having said that, please know that Phi Alpha Delta isn't wealthy. We have limited budget. I didn't see whether Dan is on the call, our treasurer, but he would want you all to know when submitting for reimbursement, be as generous as you can to Phi Alpha Delta. Jay and Kitty before him, and Stephen before, and a long line of international Supreme Justices have given so much to this fraternity. And there is sort of an expectation as a board member that you can contribute to your capacity. So that's my bit, Michelle.
Other panel members want to talk about time commitment or, about, I mean, I can tell you how much time I spend doing Phi Alpha Delta, but I don't sleep, so it's probably not the same.
Michelle, I do want to bring up another point too. One expectation too when you come on the board, you may be a DJ before, you might have been an alumni chapter officer, maybe you were very involved in mock trial. And it's okay to still be involved in those things, but like John said, your board duties got to take precedence, even over the other things you do in P.A.D. That's your job, doing what you need to do for the board. So you got to step away from your former DJ role or your former chapter officer role or your former mock trial role. I encourage people to participate in their areas and their alumni chapters and law school chapters, and hey, that's extra stuff. That's great if you're doing that. However, in the past, we did have issues with, hey, we can't schedule a board meeting during that time because we have the initiation of this chapter. Well, no, you got to step away from the initiation to participate in our board meeting, because that's your job as a board member. So if you have conflict with other responsibilities, your board commitment comes from.
Echo Jay's point. If it's in our policy manual, it might even be in our corporate bylaws. You cannot serve on any other elected position in the fraternity if you serve on the board. Jay has made that really clear, and I think we're the better board for it when we divorce ourselves from each individual chapter or a region, if you're a DJ, and say, I'm a board member first.
Hey, Michelle.
And I get it. You might become the justice of an alumni chapter and brought the chapter to new heights, and the thing's doing great. And then when you leave, it starts to not do well because whoever came after you is not running it the way you would run it, maybe. And I get it. It's painful to kind of watch that, but you need to let go.
Nicole, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to say there's a couple questions that had cropped up that I think John Karasik had addressed in the chat, but I thought they were worth saying out loud. So there are questions about whether there were different time commitments for different positions. And I think John's response was spot on. Obviously, the IJ is going to have bigger time commitment in certain respects, and at certain times of the year, the treasurer may as well. And then obviously, as John McKell said, if you are asked by the IJ to serve on an additional committee, then you will have some additional time spent in your committee work beyond monthly board calls, beyond the other responsibilities. And then also just keeping up with emails. We do a lot of our business by email. And so it's important that you check your email daily and that you respond timely and vote on ballots. All those things are very important so that we can do the business of the fraternity.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to helpful skill sets. Nicole Winget, do you want to address some helpful skill sets that you think it will help move the fraternity forward? And then if anyone else wants to weigh in after Nicole, that'd be great.
Absolutely, thank you. I think for specific positions, treasurer and secretary, I haven't held either of those, but I can see from their experience that there are specific skill sets, particularly for treasurer. Most of the skill sets that you need, we've talked about. Excellent time management skills. This is another, I hate to call it a part-time job, but it can be. Some weeks we're putting in multiple hours a week, if not a day, on items. So being able to manage your time, interpersonal skills, being able to communicate with a very large and diverse group of people is essential for any board position. We've got an awesome, large and diverse fraternity, so you have to be able to communicate effectively across a whole wide range of demographics. Conflict management, with any group of large people, again, you're going to have some conflict. So how you're able to approach that and lead from the front in conflict management is very important. So those are some of the big: time management, conflict resolution, and ability to communicate across a large demographic. I think are probably the three biggest broad skill sets that we need to bring to the board.
Great. John McKell or anyone else on the panel, do you have any other skill sets that you think you found useful or that we could really use to move the fraternity into the next 100 years?
Absolutely. So your experience beyond Phi Alpha Delta, your Ultra Vires experience, to me, is more important than your Phi Alpha Delta experience. Everybody here is a fantastic P.A.D. There are fantastic P.A.Ds throughout our organization. What makes us stronger is when you bring your experience from out of P.A.D., your service on other not-for-profit organizations, your service helping clients in a different way than your legal experience. If you're able to advise companies, we've had at times people who have had employment law experience. That's certainly helpful. Michelle Ishwood has been amazing in contributing her knowledge base in marketing. Dan McDowell in his skill set with finances. Those are the skill sets that help, because that's what the board deals with. Because ideally, your board's at a high level. We constantly vigilant to not get in the weeds. Your board assembled, those 9 people don't set every single procedure, every single step of the way. A lot of that is done in committee. Even more of it is done by our executive office staff, that professional staff that is under Executive Director Andrew Sagan, doing amazing work. So what the board brings is vision. What the board brings is the ability to plan for our immediate and long-range future. So that's what I think our skill sets are best. Hey, Michelle, I think you're still on mute.
Oh, how am I on mute? Hold on.
Hey,
Oh,
Michelle, can I chime in on that?
of course, go ahead.
So echo exactly what Nicole and John have said, and kind of hearkening back to the previous about what the expectations are. Before anyone decides to truly run for the board or the trip, I would encourage you to take a really honest look at your ability to commit to the organization. I've stepped off the board at 2 separate times, and both times it was because what was going on in my life didn't allow me to give the time that I needed to the fraternity. So when I've been asked to come back on the board, it's been hard just to do, because you really got to be honest with yourself. Do I have the time and energy and the resources to give back? This last time when I stepped off the board, I moved over to the Trib, and that's worked really well for me. And echoing again what Kitty said, the Trib's not a stepping stone to the board. In fact, I think to be a good Trib member, you need to have a full understanding of our fraternity and all the moving parts. So for me, I feel more qualified to be on the Trib, having served 8 years on the International Executive Board, because I know when and if a case in controversy comes, I've got that foundation to be able to address it. The other thing is, you know, it's not linear. Like somebody said earlier, it's not a rite of passage or a graduation or an expectation. It really is a special skill set that you have to bring to the board, because of the size of our organization, because how spread out we are, because of all the moving parts of our organization, our International Executive Board is very busy. We try to stay out of the weeds, but oftentimes we get into the weeds. But it is a very active board, and it's not passive where you're just reviewing things that the International Executive Office brings to you at the board meeting. So you're doing your critical thinking during the board meeting. There is a lot of critical thinking, planning, brainstorming, collaborating that goes on outside of those board meetings. And you have to be able to devote that time, that energy to the service of the board. And you know, to a lesser extent on the trip, we have not had a case or controversy yet, knock on wood. But when and if it comes, you know, it's going to require all hands on deck and dropping everything. And like John McKell said, prioritizing the fraternity at that time. So I hope that adds to this last section.
Good. Cliff, do you have anything to add? I know when I first was thinking about running for the board, it was something you came in and talked to us about skill sets that you thought a good board needed to move forward.
Thank you very much. I was taking, as is my style, some copious notes throughout from different parts of it, and I would just offer the following observations. First and foremost, I think this is an awesome webinar and a topic, and the educational opportunities for people to get together and get a better understanding about the international leadership is second to none. And it's something, quite frankly, that this board of your guys' direction is deeply valued and very much appreciated. I suggest that as you look at this and as the people that are participating in this and are considering it, that it not stop here, that this is just the first step in someone's consideration to serve as an international officer, either on the Tribunal or on the board. Talk to the Tribunal, talk member, talk to an existing for the National Executive Board. I would suggest, if okay, that with respect to some of the observations that we've heard so far, and they're all excellent, is even going back to the concept of this, your statement. Think as you would being forward. Perhaps if it's electronic, link to a P.A.D. bio, link to something else that talks about the past and your experience as to why you want to be there. But in your statement, talk about what you want to do over the next 2 years and think forward to that. I think that would be helpful to to the members of the committee as well as to the electorate at large. I guess with respect to myths, I took a note, and for me, the biggest myth about serving on the board is you don't have to be a litigator. Just like you don't have to, be a litigator in private practice. There's so many ways you could bring a skill set to the board. You don't have to be a litigator. We should think outside the box with respect to that. I think John McGill and Jay said it correctly, that Phi Alpha Delta needs to be your top philanthropic and professional opportunity and organization. Lots of other things going on in your life, but if you truly want to be an international officer, P.A.D. first and foremost in your minds. I would also, add on to some of the comments that were made with respect to serving one constituency. As a DJ, which I concur with him and others that have talked about the fact that that's the coolest, perhaps most rewarding job in the fraternity, having served in that. That's provincial. That is parochial. As a member of the board and a Tribunal, constituency is the entire fraternity. And whether it is deciding on best chapter or who's the best district justice, etc., check your location and past, if you will, in terms of where you represented and who you represented at the door. And I guess finally, I would say that it is an awesome experience to serve on this board. And it is one that, to the extent you believe in Alpha Delta, it is one that you will actually get more out of than you can put into it if you do it right. but it is important that you put in that time. Hope that was helpful.
For questions? Oh, go ahead. Did someone want to say
I
something?
just wanted to add the one part to piggyback off of what Cliff said. Board service is immensely rewarding. It is in learning from your peers, learning from your mentors. I've learned more from Cliff Schechter in little moments like that. Watch what I encourage you all, whether you're sitting on the board or aspire to re-watch the video and just watch the 2-3 minutes that Cliff Schechter said. Because when there's a very old commercial talking about when certain people talk, everybody listens. He's one of those. And it's those relationships and learning from your mentors and growing with your peers that really makes Phi Alpha Delta board service rewarding. It is a lot of time, but it is certainly rewarding. I wanted to touch on one thing we didn't talk about, which is fundraising. In the past, Phi Alpha Delta executive board members were also responsible for our foundation, for fundraising. We've sort of transitioned away from that. There's still a fundraising component. We are obviously always thinking about it, but it goes more towards our foundation that raises our money. And then I guess the last bit, well, you know what? I see Derek Hill just joined in. I'm going to stop talking.
So I want to open it up to questions, other comments or concerns. I actually agree with everything the panelists have said. The time commitment sometimes can be a lot, and and there's no shame. And maybe right now in your career or your life, this isn't a commitment you can make. But we wanted to have this particular conference and the webinar just to put the information out there. And that way, as a starting point, and if you ever have questions or concerns or comments, I invite any and all of you to contact any of us, any past board members, any current board members, any past TRIB members, any current TRIB members. Reach out, ask questions. We are always available for those kind of questions. And again, I appreciate everyone coming on the call at this time. And does anyone have any questions?
Michelle, it's Jay. I just wanted to say one thing.
Did you have a comment? Are you having technical difficulties?
Yeah. I guess I was having a hard time getting off of mute. The one skill, the one thing, and this is more broadly with respect to skills. If you're going to be on the board, definitely you should be somebody who's a leader, and have some kind of proven track record of being a leader. While at the same time, you need to be a team player. In the last 2 bienniums, and this is how we've been moving, is when we have assigned board members things, we've told them, take the lead, create your own committee, your own working group. You're going to lead, pick your own people, and then you should know that you should be picking people who are leaders who can work together as a team who are going to get things done. We've learned a lot in that regard, and really a lot of board members have risen to the occasion with respect to that, because they essentially have formed their own teams to get these tasks done. So again, leadership and teamwork. Those are the 2 things we're really dealing with on a more general level.
I saw a question in the chat about if you want to go ahead and ask that out loud so that the video, or so we can get it recorded, because it's a great question. Is it Jahi, you had that question, or Dana? you want to unmute and ask it out loud, it'd be great because I want to get it. Definitely want that captured in the recording.
Well, trying to remember what it was now. Chat just
So I know my question was, where do you go to find information about each position and what they do?
So that's a great question. The governing documents do talk about each position. One of the things that we've been that we're hoping to work on going forward is some job descriptions and things like that. But it is in the governing documents, which are on P.A.D.org. You just have to log in, and if you need your login, just contact the executive office because they'll reset it for you and give you your password and everything. But that's a great question. But again, that's just what's on paper. So if you have questions and if there's a position that you're particularly interested in, I'd say reach out to the person who holds it now or has held it in the past. And if you're looking for those kind of contacts, just reach out to me, Andrew, Emily, any of us, any of the court board members, and we can definitely hook you up with someone who can answer the question and give you more of a one-on-one, like what it really means to be there as opposed to what it looks like on paper.
Hey, Michelle, could I add? Sure. Could I add something to that? And again, giving credit where credit's due. I think John Karasset had said it in the chat box over here, but as we were talking about earlier, we have a lot of working committees. So although my primary responsibility is to maintain order as the international marshal, I have been tasked with various other things over the course of the biennium. I've been working on the International Expansion Committee. I've been working on the Executive Committee. I've been working on other projects as needed. So it's, the positions will say what the positions say, but you guys, those of you who've held leadership positions either in your law school, alumni, pre-law chapters, or even other organizations know other projects come up. And so it's not just what's in those documents and it's not just what's on that paper. It's a willingness to serve and it's a willingness to move the fraternity forward.
I think that's a good point. There's a lot of other duties as assigned. I've been working on Initiative 1 and doing the focus groups and working on branding for the fraternity and some chapter revitalization ideas. So those types of things, they get assigned at the IJ's pleasure, and we work on whatever you get assigned, in addition to the general running of the fraternity. So again, that's why I encourage everyone to reach out to someone who actually holds the position or who has held the position, just to get a real concept of what that means time-wise. And
you're gonna have curveballs thrown at you because even 2 months ago, nobody told me that we would have to be figuring out contingency plans for our events because of coronavirus. So guess what? That's something that never was part of the job description before. Guess what?
Hurricanes, maybe. Coronavirus, no.
No.
Any other questions or concerns? Well, I want to thank everybody for participating, the panel and the participants. Again, if you have any questions, a lot of the information about the nominations committee and the dates for when things are due will be on P.A.D.org. I actually looked at the page today. It looks fantastic. Check it out. Again, if you need anything, info@P.A.D.org is the general email box that goes to the EO. Any of us or any EO staff, they're there to help you. And again, thank you all for participating, and we hope you have a great night. Stay safe and healthy.